cheaters because you want to focus there, and people tend to want to focus there anyway. I take it that in a system where it's set up like the one I'm talking about, where there's good educational opportunities for all, where the job opportunities are decent for all, and what's asked of people is to make a good contribution and then they will get a decent life. The motivation to cheat and to be unfair will be diminished.
Well, not cheat, but be lazy. I know
We educate people. We educate people into doing, to making the contribution. If they actually are not living up to their potential, we might have ways of sort of trying to, encourage them in certain ways. Maybe, publicly complain about them and move them in that way. When everybody else is trying to do their job, and some are not, I think we can work with those people who are not. And the background of most situations, I think, where poor people are in is they look at the system, they see the system is skewed against them, they see that they could try to live within the rules, but they're very unfair rules. And though the temptation to cheat, break the law, is great in the system. They're not being treated fairly. They have really some serious objections to the way, the chances that they were given in the society. You take that all away, I think you build toward people willing to do the best they can. And the example of that will be all around people. There'll still be failures. Failures of talented people, failures of less talented people. We'll find some way of dealing with it. It won't be a systematic problem, don't think. That's would be my hope. Yes?
Does your thesis envision that there's only one definition of morality and one definition of doing enough, or what's the term that you're using, for productivity? Who's going to decide? I mean, I'm not so sure that everybody has the same idea of what morality is, or that all of us would agree on, or that who's going to decide what is the moral code that applies here, and who's going to decide what is enough productivity? How do you get society to agree on those two? To me, very critical.
Yeah, well, what I did was I didn't say, well, here's a definition of morality and isn't it great? What I started was, look, I wanted to build some defense of morality. And by morality at this point, all I meant was that I take morality to be a system that deals with conflicts of interest. If you think morality doesn't deal with conflicts of interest at all, I don't know that's the only common element of it. And then the question is how to resolve those conflicts. There'll be conflicts between ourselves and others. And morality will give some kind of solution to that. And of course, what my way I started off with was, of course, the egoist wasn't going to have anything to do with this. He wasn't going to be committed to morality because he wasn't going to cave in or allow that when his interests conflict with others, he would go with the interests of others.
So are you saying an egoist is immoral?
Yes, but they're happy with that. I mean, they that's their view. They're against morality. The egoist is against morality. What?
You think an egoist feels like he's immoral?
Yeah, he thinks morality is silly and stupid, and he got you all to believe that morality is what you should do, and then he's not going to tell you this, but he's going to find a way to cheat you. Cheat. Egoists will be great for cheating, because the egoist thinking initially, is that's the rational thing to do. He's being rational and you're being stupid and irrational, and that's my egoist. I'm just a tough character. I'm just a real opponent of morality. And whereas the moral person is trying to find some compromise between the interests of self and others and willing to make some sacrifice. The question is what to work that out. So the egoist is my big opponent. And what am I going to do here? If I got an egoist and somebody's committed morality, I can't you know, I have to try to find some neutral ground between the two of them, and my neutral ground is rationality. If the egoist isn't committed to being rational, I'm up the window. Can't do anything. But I assume the egoists are committed to rationality in the sense of committed to a good argument. They think they have a good argument for egoism, at least initially. And then I say, well, let's talk about what a good argument would be in this context. And I say, well, look, you know, you have to give a good argument that would be acceptable from an egoist perspective, or at least take egoist considerations into account, and take altruistic considerations into account. So then I've got egoism and egoist and altruism reasons. And I'm saying, look, the only non-question begging way to deal with egoism and altruist reasons is to compromise them. Favor high-ranking self-interested reasons when they conflict with low-ranking altruistic reasons. Favor high-ranking altruistic reasons when they conflict with low-ranking self-interested reasons. And that's the form of morality is compromise. Now I've solved the egoism problem, but I still haven't dealt with the libertarian problem, where people will, you know, the libertarian is committed to morality. They will, you know, they're interested in, they're not egoists. They're not going to go and further their own interests and put a knife in your chest. I mean, that would be interfering with your liberties. It's no good. So there's limits on what the libertarian will do. Now, but then I say, well, let's talk about the libertarian view, because that's a form of morality which seems to be most removed from where I'm going to try to take morality to equality. So if I could show that libertarian premises lead to equality, you know, that sweeps the field in a way, because libertarian was the closest, in one sense, the closest to egoism. The libertarian thought there were very few obligations to others, maybe obligation of charity, but no obligations of where you could be coercively required to help others. So then what I try to show is that the libertarian view, when you neutrally look at the liberties that are at stake, you're going to have to favor the liberty of the poor over the liberty of the rich, where the liberty of the poor, where it's a very important liberty, and the liberty of the rich, where it's not so important. Liberty of the rich over luxury goods, the liberty of the poor over basic needs. That's going to fake. So you end up you're going to get your welfare. Well, then you got the right to welfare out of libertarianism. Well, let's see. So you said first it was the issue about productivity. So that's the issue about morality. That's how productivity. Well, you got a system. When you bought my view here, if you did, the productivity is now geared to meeting basic needs. There's not going to be much productivity in who can make the next most luxury car or something. That's not going to be in the production anymore. So what you're going to do is having productivity directed to meeting basic needs and providing education for people, basic health care for people. So already, and also, you can have productivity. You can have people as researchers to try to figure out better ways to meet basic needs. Maybe even people trying to find a technological fix. Remember I said inequality could enter in if you get a technological fix. So if you figure out a way to make everything out of sand, everything, then maybe we could have inequalities. But given the way we look at the resource structure, there's non-renewable resources, we're thinking about everybody, and we're going to have to not use any more resources than a decent life until we have a technology that will allow, a much more widespread use of resources, because we can do everything, or we can avoid the technological problem we seem to be in. And I think until we get a solution to that technological problem, then we have to live with this equality. That's the only way. Here's what I'm thinking about. Future generations looking back on us, will they condemn us for what we did? That we took out their resource base and left them with hardly anything to get scratched by, and we had all these luxuries. We used our resources for all these luxuries, and we only lived a decent life and kept our resources at that level. They could have had a decent life, and then the generation after them could have a decent life, and generation after that. Now, if we're dead and gone and there's no afterlife, we're not going to, but there is this thing as we look at it now. Do we want to be condemned as utterly immoral for the way we live our lives? I mean, I would, even if I did believe in the after, I wouldn't want that to be the possibility of we're so immoral that we've disregarded the rights of future generations, libertarian rights of future generations, and lived and had all these luxuries.
Jim, we probably have time for one more question.
I
Is there
have two
anything
long
else
answers
that,
here. Yes.
I have one thought. We think a lot about whether or not people will be productive, and it would seem to me, because I have given this a lot of thought, that if people are doing what they do well and what they like to do, then you would have someone like the brain surgeon who wanted to be a brain surgeon, who's happy to be a brain surgeon.
Yeah.
And if it didn't cost more to go to school to be a brain surgeon than it does to be trained in a blue-collar field, if that's what one is interested in and enjoys, then if we were all doing what we enjoy doing, we would all be doing things. We would be happy to be productive.
Yeah.
And maybe we'd only work 4 hours a day or 3 days a week, but we'd all be doing what we love, so we'd all be happy and we'd all be productive.
Yeah.
And we'd all have what we need.
Yeah. That's good. That's
And
very
even if
good.
machines could do it for us, if we had technology,
Yeah.
and we didn't have to do anything but pick up our goods and enjoy each other's company, and listen to music and read books.
Yeah.
I mean, and teach. I mean, why not?
Yeah, I think a lot, that's a very good point about you could make work intrinsically rewarding. And a lot of people, a lot of wealthy people, and a lot of maybe brain surgeons, I mean, are not doing it primarily for the money at all anyway. I would think, another way to think about this is think about professional sports, baseball, football. When I was a kid, the salaries were way down, Mickey Mantle was playing. I mean, the salaries are way, and now, you got salaries up the roof, out of the roof. And is the game played better, more interestingly because of salaries? I mean, suppose we started bringing the salaries of professional baseball players or football players down uniformly. You think all of a sudden they're going to start, no, I don't care. No, I think they're going to be still interested in playing and putting their foot because they like the game, they love the game. And then maybe some substitutions. If you have people, you had a brain surgeon only doing it for the money, I'm not getting real. So that what happens? He falls out. Maybe he does something else because he's only going to get a certain amount. And then you get a person that really wants to help people by being a brain surgeon. In this system, they can get the education, and then they get into the job, and they're doing it because they really want to make this contribution. It's their best contribution given their skills, and they're really happy to do that. So, you might get a better kind of brain surgeon in a system that was sort of really phasing out the monetary advantage of the whole thing.